Is the U.S. ready for the World Cup?
You know, Christina, thank you for having us today. I think we are.
Okay.
I mean, we have been working at this for about 3.5 years. Government is working very closely with FIFA. I think the biggest challenge is that we have sort of a fragmented system here in the United States where we have 11 host cities where these events are normally run by one organizing committee.
And the country's quite large. You can't just hop from one to the other.
This is very true, and I think that's something that can also propose some additional stress that might happen with just transportation.
What are the biggest obstacles you're seeing? Is it logistics? Is it transportation? Is it all of the above?
I think it's all of the above. I mean, the logistics are certainly a challenge. I think individuals coming from different countries are going to recognize just how big the United States is. Just planning your trip, you know, if you have to go from Kansas City to Boston, that involves several flights. And then you have to figure out how you're going to get to the stadium.
Travis Murphy, your specialty is immigration in the context of athletics. So I'm curious, kind of at both levels, are you detecting more unease or trepidation among athletes about coming here in light of the heightened enforcement that Christina mentioned? Are you seeing that among fans as well? How much is that a concern, just the uncertainty surrounding immigration policy in this country as all of this unfolds?
Yeah, it absolutely is a significant concern for individuals looking at traveling over. You know, FIFA has done a good job of creating a process for the teams, even some of those that are on travel ban lists, to be able to travel to the United States. We're talking about the teams themselves, players, coaches, physios, the people behind the scenes, but the fans themselves, yeah, there's a lot of concern, and there hasn't been, despite calls for this, really any reassurances that there won't be a heavy-handed security presence who might be pulling people out of the crowd, and so I think there's understandably still a lot of concern.
Your team helps handle some of those negotiations about those teams getting their visas. Is there concern still among members of the team? Have you heard reticence or concern that even though, yes, the paperwork is here, that that's not going to be the case once they get here? Or are you satisfied with the U.S. government's response?
I think for the teams themselves,
yeah,
they're going to be fine. The fans are a different question because you're talking about fans coming over, and there's really two ways that fans can come over. There's those that can travel on what's called visa waiver. So that's 42 countries that are allowed to travel without going into an embassy. They just fill out an online application, and that's typically kind of Western Europe, South Korea, Japan, more developed nations, ally nations with high-level information sharing. But then you have visas, people who have to go into a United States embassy and apply for a visa to come to the United States. And there's been a lot of conversation around whether or not people will be approved, if they can get an appointment in time. But then you have this additional layer of complication or concern over, well, what happens when we get there? As David mentioned, there's the transportation element, there's the logistics, there's the price hikes, and frankly, just the barrier to entry to even get a ticket into these games has been widely reported as being the most expensive sporting event in history.
We were talking about that USA-Paraguay game that was like $1,500 minimum or something.
This week, 4 tickets went on sale for the finals game on the secondary market. There were $2 million a ticket.
Wow. Incredible. David, let me pull back a bit. We're talking about this in the context of the World Cup, but just since the second Trump term started, has it been more of an issue for athletes who live overseas to come here to the U.S. to join teams and play? Is it something that goes beyond the World Cup, the crucible of the World Cup?
Yeah, I mean, certainly. The administration has added an additional layer. You know, there are things that, you know, exist in Trump 2.0 that didn't exist in the first term. So we have additional travel bans. There are visa waiver bonds that individuals that need to pay if they want to come to the United States. So there's an additional layer, and I think, you know, these federations are trying to figure out how they navigate those different processes. I will say this, the government is working and very communicative about what those policies look like. And so it's a challenge, but we're working through it.
It's not ambiguous. They're willing to engage. And
that's correct. Yeah, they're willing to engage.
But when you're dealing with, you know, MLB, you know, NHL, hockey, these big sports firms, and they recruit people from all over the world, our athletes, I mean, this is where athletes, for the most part, are getting the best gigs, the highest paying gigs. When they're looking at that risk-benefit analysis, are you hearing any kind of pullback that people are reluctant to even take those slots, not like the really high-paying level, but the lower level? Is that part of the conversation and the thought process for these athletes, whether or not they want to live the next couple years of their lives in the U.S., whether they get their families here, whether this is something they want to deal with?
You know, it's a tough choice, but I think, you know, the benefit that the United States has is that we have the best leagues in the world.
Yeah.
these players want to come here. They understand that cost-risk analysis is that coming to the United States can open pathways and avenues from a commercial standpoint, from a sponsorship and branding. So I think they're willing to take that risk.
Travis, let me ask you about sports diplomacy, which is a phrase we hear around the World Cup. Heard about it during the Olympics a few months back. You were in the Foreign Service officer before. What does it mean today? How vibrant is sports diplomacy at a moment when we've seen, obviously, the U.S.'s diplomatic footprint retrenched under this administration?
Yeah, there's a strange dichotomy here that sports diplomacy, I don't think, has ever been as widely utilized. We hear it a lot, as you said, in kind of news. Here in Washington, D.C., there's a lot of different entities that are trying to now figure out how best to engage in sports diplomacy. But it means different things to different people, and we're doing this in an environment where diplomacy isn't necessarily the top priority of the administration. I do think that we're in a unique situation in the United States in that we're one of the very few countries in the world that doesn't have a ministry of sports. Most other countries you go to, including Canada and Mexico, have a federal level coordinating body that coordinates sports and sees sports policy as integral to their engagement with foreign countries. We don't have that in the United States. And it's not like the NBA, NFL are looking for more federal government involvement in their day-to-day operations, but at the same time, I think when we look at this landscape of events, the World Cup this summer, the World Military Games next year, the Olympics in 28, and on through the 2034 Winter Games back in Utah, we're seeing this disconnect between widespread government coordination at a sustainable pace. We have a task force in place for the World Cup, but doing a task force for each individual event is obviously pretty inefficient. And so one of the things we've been working on is how do we elevate the conversations around sports where we see that as a real policy tool, get away from this idea of soft power and more towards this idea that sports is frankly one of the most influential aspects of our culture and our society that we have to reach the world.
David, to that point, very quickly before we have to go, what does success look like? If the U.S. wants a sports diplomatic win here, what do these events, the World Cup, the Olympics, what are they looking for? What does that look like?
I mean, first off, it has to be secured. Logistically, I think people need to be able to come and go. I think the athletes need to be able to perform without any distractions. And I think, again, we have 11 host cities in the United States, all of them pulling equal weight, because I think the tournament's success is only going to be as good as our weakest link. So we want to make sure that LA is just as good as Boston, and Boston is just good as Dallas and the other.
You think we're going to pull it off?
I think so. I have a good confidence.
Same here?
Yeah, no, it's going to be a great event. Inevitably there will be headlines, there will be hiccups. You can't have 6 million ticketed fans coming in for games and not have a few issues.